The world has need of them, those who stand upon the bridge, who know the pain in the singing of a bird, and the beauty beyond a flower dying, who have heard the crystal harmony within the silence of a snow-peaked mountain. For who but they can bring life's meaning to the living dead? Oh, the world needs those standing on the bridge, for they know how eternity reaches to earth in the wind that brings music to the leaves of the forest, in the drops of rain that caress the sleeping life of the desert, in the sunbeams of the first spring day in an alpine meadow. Only they can blow the dust from the seeing eyes of those who are blind. Yet pity them, those who stand on the bridge, for they, having known utter peace, are moved by an ancient compassion to reach back to those who cry out from a world which has lost its meaning, a world where the atom, the clay of the sculptor, is torn apart in the name of science for the destruction of love. And so they stand there on the bridge, torn by the anguish of free will, yearning with unshed tears to go back, to return to the starlight of their beginnings, to the utter peace of the unfleshed spirit. Yet only they can whisper songs of love to those who struggle helpless toward light. Oh, let them not desert us, those on the bridge, those who have known love in the freedom of the night sky and know the meaning of the moon's existence beyond man's fumbling footsteps into space. For they know the eternal power that encompasses life's beginnings and gathers up its endings and lays them, like Joseph's coat, on the never-changing, always-moving canvas that stretches beyond the universe and is contained in the eye of a little frog. That's a poem called Only They Can Whisper Songs of Hope, directly from Jane Goodall's book, Reason for Hope. As you know, we've been reading Reason for Hope, and we've finished. And so on this new episode here, we're going to be opening up this book, talking a bit about it, and really opening up the idea of compassion and communication and our connection to spirituality in this world of society and science. And I'm very excited to dig in. So let's do that on this episode 2 of the Sustainable Culture Book Club, Reason for Hope. Hi there, I'm Jet.
I'm Bree.
And welcome back to the Sustainable Culture Book Club. On the podcast here, we're pretty excited because we've finished Reason for Hope.
Super good.
Yay! And I hope you guys did too. I had a great experience. I have to admit, and I don't know if Bree wants to admit anything and make any confessions, but I definitely had a hard time reading this book after reading the first half. Not because the book was bad at all, because the book was amazing.
The book's amazing.
Amazing. I will read it again. It's a rereader, officially.
Absolutely.
But I procrastinated really bad. I had to read half of the book in 2 days because I sucked.
It's a quick read though. But you started a new job and I went back to work full time. And so right in the middle of all of this, and then the world exploded.
And then the world exploded. It's still in explosion phase.
Yes.
Currently, which is, that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you had a similar experience.
I had a similar experience, and I mean, heck, this is the second time I read it. But like the second half, like after she starts talking about like animal rights, life just like hit me like a freight train. Like everything that happened, and then I am still like catching up with all of the clients who had to reschedule during the COVID thing. So I'm working like overtime full time, and so I'd be working from like.
Are you doing like more than 5 days a week?
There were some weeks where it was like 6 days a week, and that job is so physical, and I was so wiped by the time I was done. I'm just like, I'm going to go directly to bed.
Yeah.
And then lather, rinse, repeat the next day until it was Groundhog Day all over again, but in a different kind of way. So I'm hoping for more balance.
Yeah, Groundhog Month.
Groundhog Year at this point.
Oh, please no. I don't want another 2020. I don't want it.
My sister's like, what if 2020 is just a trailer for 2021? I was like, shut up.
Dude, I know. I keep hearing people go like, what happened to coronavirus? Oh, that was season 1. And like,
I don't like this TV show. Oh, stop it.
And then the funnier thing, I always like the tiny minor details of like, wait, what happened to the murder hornets?
I know, that's a huge plot.
It was a filler episode.
It was a filler episode.
Yeah.
Mine was just like, oh, that was a dropped plot line. Just
that was director's cut. That was it. Oh, that was the uncut version. It's like the Lord of the Rings extended cut.
Yes.
It's just 2020 extended cut with murder hornets.
Oh gosh, they tried to bring back that plot line because I read in the news yesterday they found another like murder hornet body, but it didn't gain traction. So apparently, like the viewership, like said no to the murder hornet storyline.
We don't like the murder hornet, but the thing is, it was a real story, and it's still ongoing.
Yeah,
that's the amazing thing is it's still ongoing. They're still working on getting rid of the invasives because they're invasive. And they have a shot at it.
Yeah.
But that's as optimistic as we've got so far.
Yeah.
If you want that's the actual story.
Yeah.
The scientists who are working on it, the official word is, we're pretty sure. Like, that's the... I know. we got a good shot. It's like, it's like the underdog team in football where because I know so much about football. And they run off, they run out in the field, and they're like, we haven't lost a game yet.
This feels like an episode of Parks and Rec right
now. What happened to the murder hornets? Well, we're pretty sure we got it. Isn't it just you? Did you fire your entire workforce because of coronavirus? Gotta go. Yeah. Pretty sure. We'll see. All right.
See you next year for 2021.
For 2021, season 2.
Oh, I want a nice year.
Is the rioting and looting season 2? Or is that the end of season? I think it's the end of season because it's like, what's going to happen freaking next?
Yeah, I think it feels like the end of season 2.
I think so. I think it's the end. Either it's the end of season 1 or the end of season 2. I don't even know anymore.
It's the end of season because the next season started with the Seattle Autonomous Zone because nobody saw that one coming. Right. So that's the season opener for season whatever.
Nobody's going anywhere. It's like
it's nuts. What do you do? The world's a crazy place.
I should have had. I'm unprepared. I should have had some wine ready to go.
Hello, welcome to the Midday Book Club.
I know this definitely feels like an alcohol episode.
Yeah. Hi. This is what the intro should have been. It just been us with our half-empty glasses of wine, just been like looking at the camera, going, "Hey, it's not gotten any better yet, but here we are."
Next time, if things haven't improved, that's what we're doing.
That's what we'll do. Yeah. I might have a pipe. I might have to go get a corncob pipe.
I have one.
Do you?
I'll bring mine and we can just sit there and just be like,
hey. We're like hair messed up.
Yeah. It's a slow descent into madness.
I haven't showered in about 3 days. That was by choice. Who cares anymore?
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Anyway, we're talking about something in particular, I swear.
Right.
We did read this book, I promise.
Yes.
Procrastination and everything. We did read the book. Let's start with you. I started so generously last time. You've read this book before.
Yeah.
And so you got sort of this additional angle.
Yeah.
At an already established one.
And it was awesome because I picked up little nuggets that I missed. And I have two things that stand out the most as my absolute favorite thing. They are like 100% equal. I'll start with the first one because it's a very small part of the book. But it was when Jane got into it wasn't an argument. It's when that lady like lost her mind about animal rights, saying like, how dare you? Like,
oh yeah.
Try to campaign for that. And she's like, look, like I'm not saying, that it's bad. We owe so many animals our lives, and because we owe them so much, we should treat them with the utmost respect. Don't you agree? Mm-hmm. And so they found that common ground like almost instantly.
Almost right away.
Yeah. And then the lady was like, oh, yeah, you're right. And to me, that was such a profound way because Jane, like, she talks...
I'm going to see if I can find that while you're looking.
Yeah. She talks about all of her interactions with people, and she's really good at just, like, with the cab driver, she's just like, hey, this is how it is, and she understands that she personally is not going to change their mind. They have to change their own mind. And so all she can do is share her experience. And to me, I think that's the best way to just like find common ground. I thought, to me, that is always the one that sticks out in my head the most. Is one of my favorite parts of the book. And then on equal parts of the book was the 4-Year War, which like that could be an episode of its own entirety.
Man, the 4-Year War. So
yeah.
For those of you who haven't read the book, 4-Year War is what Jane called, when she was studying chimpanzees in Gombe, which of course was like over the course of, 25, 30 years altogether. But when she was out there studying, she witnessed like tribal warfare between these two groups of what used to be the same group of chimpanzees. They had separated into 2 groups. Turned out to be a territory war from what they observed, but there was just, oh my gosh, gruesome stuff.
Yeah, absolute brutality at its rawest form.
Rawest form. I mean, you think about how brutal humans can be. It's not worse than that. Humans are definitely worse than chimpanzees. But it was more just raw, I guess, for lack of a better term. There was no...
Well, she talks about the idea of the noble chimp, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that it's interesting, like we have this like fairy tale idea of nature when in actuality, like there's some parts of nature that we still see within ourselves, and that's why it's important to study it. And my brain hooked onto like the 4-Year War. It's a very negative part of the book, but it was so enlightening as far as like what's going on in the world, because she talks about how the chimps have an ability to de-chimpify the other chimps somehow, and it just like we're at one point where they were friends and now they're like beating the tar out of the other ones.
De-chimpify, because she was talking about how we humans tend to, and historically this has been the case time and time and time again, where we've dehumanized each other. The Nazi regime is one of the more obvious examples with the concentration camps and everything, where we dehumanized each other and treated, Jewish people like they were actual animals.
Yep.
And
it makes it easier to justify your actions if what you're doing doesn't apply to like another human.
Yeah.
And that's just human history right there. Like,
oh my gosh. Time and time again, because, we talk about the Nazi concentration camps, which is more recent and more easy to, I guess, relate with. But you talk about the terrors of, and she brought up some of this, of Mao and... not to forget Stalin. Yeah. People talk about Hitler.
Yeah.
Some of the deaths that Stalin is actually responsible for trumps, I think, some of the deaths of what Hitler is responsible for in terms of actual raw numbers.
Right.
Which is not talked about as much, which is interesting.
And I've always thought that was interesting too, but heck, we even see it today with China and the Uyghur Muslims too. They're doing the exact same thing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's not gone anywhere, and I think people think that, we don't do that anymore, but we do it all the time. And there was that prison experiment they did where, like, for some reason, like, the prison guards were able to, like, in their head, dehumanize the people they were told to, quote-unquote, torture. I can't remember the experiment name.
It was, and... oh, this is going to bug me. But yeah, it was something to do with actual psychological conditioning that these guards were put through that essentially screwed up their whole morality.
Yeah.
So that they could effectively, I hate even using that word for this context, but effectively do the job that they were needed to do and treat people as if they were not human beings.
Yeah.
God, can you imagine? I mean, like, we're not even talking about this directly right now. I know we're talking about the book.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, every time that gets brought up where it's, I just can't come to, it doesn't make sense. I'm just, how, I mean, I understand psychologically, because I've done a lot of reading and learning about psychology and what leads to what. And I've gone through my own trauma, and I've gone to therapy and stuff, and I've learned what makes certain connections. So I can understand academically what causes these things and people to become those ways. People don't just become school shooters, for example, overnight. That's conditioned over a long time of unaddressed issues and unaddressed issues that then grow into other ones. So like, I get that part, but it's still so hard for me to grip the horror of how human beings treated other fellow human beings for completely not even legitimate reasons. Totally
Yeah.
like made up stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
It's like, well, like we were talking about before the episode, it goes back to humans being emotional creatures before they're logical creatures.
Right.
And I think
Right.
it's just like when you're caught up in the moment, I don't know. I mean, so here's an interesting little factoid. Anger,
Ooh.
or fear, is regulated by a certain part of the brain called the amygdala. And when the amygdala is activated, it slows blood flow to the prefrontal cortex, or the logic and reason part of the brain. So when we have like people who are on trial for like murder out of passion, I mean, there's a biological basis for it. And it's the same thing. War crimes too. I mean, it's crazy. It's not a justification for it, but there is a biological equivalent, I should say.
You can map
that.
it.
You can map
You can
it.
measure it.
Yeah. All right. So those were my favorite parts of the book. What were yours?
You know, I have so many, but
Yeah.
there was one thing that I shared where she talks about, and I won't read it exactly, but she talked a little bit about how we observe things. And I've never thought of it this way, but the way we observe things affects how we perceive things intuitively,
Yeah, that's a good one.
which is fascinating.
What page was that one on? Do you know?
That one was earlier on. I think it was 70. I texted it to you at one point.
That's
I was
right.
like,
Okay.
"Oh my God, Brie!"
It was really awesome because at the time I was actually reading a book that dealt with that exact same topic.
It's so cool. I mean, it just talks a little bit about how we categorize something, and I'm sure I'll find it some other time. But we categorize stuff. Yeah, you look at the text. But we categorize things with our words, and that therefore affects our perception of that thing, right?
Page
So
79, second paragraph.
79.
Let's all turn
Just
to
hit the
page
mouse, I don't
79
know.
of our textbooks, please.
But yeah, here it is right here. So she says, it is all but impossible to describe the new awareness that comes when words are abandoned. One is transported back, perhaps, to the world of early childhood when everything is fresh and so much of it is wonderful. Words can enhance experience, but they can also take so much away. We see an insect, and at once we abstract certain characteristics and classify it, a fly. And in that very cognitive exercise, part of the wonder is gone. Once we have labeled the things around us, we do not bother to look at them so carefully. Words are part of our rational selves, and to abandon them for a while is to give freer rein to our intuitive selves. I love that idea that when we look at something, like I'm looking at my coffee cup outside of the camera here, if I were to just look at that and not speak, not even in my head, but just maybe wonder more about different things that I don't know about, then my intuition is then sort of baited out to existence more.
Yeah.
And you know, and I was thinking about intuition. This is what amazed me about that particular part of the book, is it got me thinking. I did a whole episode on how we observe stuff.
Yeah.
Because if we observe things and our goal is to use our intuition more, you know, intuition is kind of, it's a right brain thing.
Right.
Whereas rationality is a left brain thing. It's very logic oriented. So I was just thinking about that idea. I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because that must be then really difficult, because we know from brain science that right brain people have a hard time thinking rationally and logically. A lot of times it's based on intuition and feeling and artistic stuff. That's where artistic people tend to be in. Right brain, very feelings oriented.
Yeah.
Not guilty. And this, so we have that. But then we have people who really are left-brained and, you know, well, this is this way, therefore do that. Why is this so difficult for you? Right-brain people and left-brain people tend to have really tough relationships.
Yeah.
And I do you know what I'm talking about, Brie?
I do.
Is that
I married a human computer, and which is funny because like most people think that I'm pretty logical. I'm like, no, you do not understand my husband, who is also named Josh, by the way. So I need to like clarify that real quick. But Josh, my husband, is like talking to an encyclopedia some days where I'm like, I just need you to just listen to me and just capture the emotion for once.
It just reminds me, there's this perfect commercial that is not on the air anymore. And there's this scene, not to digress too much here, but you know, Stanable Culture Podcast, we talking tangents. I'm just going to make the theme song and just get done with it. But
that should be a sticker.
We talking tangents.
I'm going to make a sticker for this podcast that says
Ooh.
that. Anyway, sorry, wow. The tangent within a tangent.
You heard it here, folks.
The idea was born on episode book club number 2.
Okay.
So there's this commercial that's perfect because it's a couple talking, a man and woman talking, and you see them, the cameras at their back, and some people might have seen this, but the lady's talking and she's like, you know, saying stuff like, it's just this pressure. It just hurts so bad, and it's just just this pressure that I can't figure out how to deal with, and I'm paraphrasing, of course. I just can't figure out this pressure, and if I could just deal with that. And he's looking, and the camera turns, and she's got a freaking nail sticking out of her forehead. She's got a nail. How it got there, nobody knows. Yeah. But it's this. He's got this nail sticking out of her forehead, and the guy, in typical dude fashion, this is a curse of all men, is he's looking at the nail, and he's like, he's kind of listening. And this is back to our listening episode, folks. Are you waiting for a chance to respond, or are you actually listening? And he goes, well, you do have a nail in there. And she's like, it's not about the nail.
I love that commercial. I
it's
forgot
not about
it.
the nail. Stop bringing up the nail. And he goes, but if we just got it out of there. And she's like freaking out at him, you know. He's like, stop talking about the nail. And the message, of course, of the commercial itself was the art of actually hearing your partner and talking about that.
It's a beautiful commercial.
It's a lovely commercial, but for some reason that reminds me of that, because it's like looking past.
Yeah.
You know.
I know. Okay, so this is kind of a tangent within a tangent, but when you sent me that text, it made me think of immediately 3 things. 1, the movie Arrival. 2, how the First Nations people talk in their language and how the Japanese talk in their language. So, 1 with Arrival is that entire movie was based on how language like changes your perception of reality, which is one of my favorite movies. Have you seen it?
No.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I'm not kidding.
No, okay, listen, after
Sorry.
this podcast, you are watching that movie. I've seen it so many times. It's one of my absolute
sorry, everyone.
favorites. I can't right now. This is a communication breakdown. Please watch that movie. Okay, anyway.
Let everyone down.
Then if you look at like the First Nations people's language, they don't refer to a tree as a tree. They refer to it as the tree people. So in that very way of how they use their language, they are identifying in an abstract concept the thought that how they relate to that tree, you know, or that object, where it's not just an object, it is something imbued within like its own inherent, you know, importance. And the Japanese are kind of the same way. My husband Josh is learning Japanese right now, and he was like translating all of these subtitles and stuff to me, and he's like, there's literally no English translation. It loses every single piece of meaning when you translate it to English. So we're talking about cultures that literally do not perceive your style of reality because they cannot, because of the language that they use, and vice versa.
Well, that's interesting.
So yeah, we lose a lot.
There's actual cultural bridges based on language.
Yeah. So that's what I thought of when you sent me that text, because in a way it works for Jane too, because she's trying to explain her spiritual experiences and still finding like hard for her to explain because of something that she could only experience. And,
right.
You know, there's certain things that words just fail at.
Sometimes words do fail because words are man-made, which is an interesting thought.
Yeah.
And thank you for bringing me back in full circle here. So she had to rope me back in, yes. So that's what it takes. If you're going to be my friend, you need to learn that art. But she does such an eloquent job at making us think about just that, is that we need our intuition to think about that which is beyond words.
Yeah.
And that's a fascinating thought if you really want to open it up, because she talks a lot about her personal connection to spirituality in this book, which is great to read about. But it is really interesting because she's talking about how, because she is very intuitive as a person. You read this book and you will definitely learn that. She she is very in touch with her emotional side, but in this very intelligent way.
Yeah.
It's not just a pure, oh, I'm an empath. It's
Yeah.
not just that.
I think she's balanced both sides of her brain.
She's very balanced. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't see someone who's a primate expert,
Yeah.
has a PhD, has very well intelligently qualified as far as, science goes. But she disagrees with a lot of old school mentalities
Yeah.
within science, which are typically very cold and calculating.
Yeah.
And
I mean, how often do you see a scientist? It's almost like having someone give you permission, a scientist say, "Hey, it's okay to be in touch with your intuitive side."
Yeah.
In fact,
Well,
I encourage it.
it was her idea,
Yeah.
apparently. I didn't realize. I knew she was such a big deal because I grew up with Jane Goodall.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize until reading this book that she was honestly one of the first, if not the first, scientist who was studying primates to come up with the idea that chimpanzees specifically, and therefore other animals, feel emotion and
Yeah.
actually feel things like pain and
Yeah.
despair and happiness and love, or at
Yeah.
least a version of it.
Well, and
It's
it's
fascinating.
because this is what me personally needed to hear, is she didn't go in discovering that with a full-on education. And I think a lot of people feel
Right,
like they're
right.
shackled because
It's a
they're
good-
not educated, when in fact that couldn't be farther from the truth. I think I mentioned this on the Instagram post. Had she had a rigorous university education that she had wanted in the beginning, would she have made the same, observation? Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah, and this is another reason, this is kind of a tangent. I see a lot of young artists say, I want to go to art school. And my personal experience with art schools and art teachers is sometimes that's very good for people, but for the most part, it completely stunts your creativity. Completely. Because you get locked in these, well, I can only do this style of medium this way.
Mm-hmm.
And then, styles are lost that way.
Well, you see the same thing with music.
Exactly.
Anything artistic, if you're put within the confines, period, it helps, yes, to learn certain bits of discipline,
Right.
it's great. Like for art, I don't know what the equivalent to art would be for this with music, but with music, it tends to be music theory.
Yeah.
Music theory is very important to know,
Right.
but if you go too strictly by the rules, you can actually lose creative ability.
Yeah.
Over time, which I think is what you're saying.
Yeah,
It's really interesting.
My art therapist, she told me once, and I think it's very profound. She's like, just have a sentence that says, "What would happen if I ... when you're creating?" And it was just like a permission slip to do whatever the hell I wanted, which was amazing because I am of the kind of person where I like lists and systems.
What would happen if I used peanut butter?
I mean, everything's
For this
fair
one.
game. I guess if you want, but
Yeah. What is the message you're going for?
yeah.
Tastiness?
I mean, squirrel art.
Nuts. What about them?
It is a systemic expression of the squirrel oppression.
Of the
economic
downfall of squirrel kind. Yeah.
But I love that quote you sent me because of those reasons, because it brought up a whole bunch of, things that I have always wondered about.
You ever want, and not to cite us too much here, but I couldn't stop. That was one of those passages that you
Yeah.
approach in books where you read it first, the first
Yeah.
time, and you go, you look up from the page going like, whoa. And then you look back down, you have to read it again.
And then you close
Sit
the
there
book
and think
put
about
it
it for a
aside.
second, put the book aside, go back to it, read it some more.
Yeah.
That one was like that for me. Everyone has a different impact with different things in books.
Yeah.
That passage might not have hit a lot of other people in
Mm-hmm.
the same way. But maybe it was what I was looking for. Maybe it's because of everything that's going on right now in the world. The fact that everything's on fire and we're
Yeah.
just trying to figure stuff out. It's very clear that a lot of us have issues with empathy and not being in touch at all with our intuitive
Right.
selves. And that causes all sort of issues with communication and love and
Yeah.
compassion and all that. And I've talked about that in length.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why that stuck out to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if she meant it to be as impactful to me as it was. But it was really
I mean,
impactful to me,
I had so many moments that you talked about when I first read this book. I was just like, read it, put it down, have a moment.
Yeah.
So that's why I think this book is such a rereader, because it is relevant in every phase of life.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a great quote. That's a really excellent favorite part, I have to say.
Well, thank you. I do try to read my books.
So we've talked about our favorite parts of the book in great length,
Like usual.
like usual. And we are going to take a quick break. So let's just take a breather. We're going to come back, and Jane, after all, the book is called Reason for Hope. Jane does quantify these in 4 steps. She believes that there are 4 main ideas that will latch us onto adapting to a good reason for hope, and really adopting these reasons and or this reason depends on the person. But she has 4 philosophies that will help us through that. We're going to talk about that about those in just a minute.
All right, guys, welcome back. Now we're going to talk about Jane's 4 reasons for hope, her very specific ones. The first one is the human brain. The second one is the resilience of nature. The third one is the energy, enthusiasm that is found or can be kindled among young people worldwide. And 4, the indomitable human spirit. So, just to kind of sum those all up, the human brain, she's talking about human ingenuity and how easily adaptable we are and how clever we are. Like, we are the most, like, excessive tool users in the animal kingdom. And, you know, what is the saying? Like, what breeds necessity? Like, trial breeds necessity. And right now we're faced with tons of trials.
Basically challenge.
Yeah,
you know,
challenge.
if you're challenged, that tells you what you need.
Yeah, and like
succeed.
right now we are facing tons of challenge. I mean, she mentions like global warming and weapons of mass destruction and how we've used
Man, she goes through the whole gauntlet.
Yeah, everything. She's like, this is where we've used our brains for not great things, and then, you know, this is how we can use our brains for good things. Which, you know, I tend to agree, but like, this is my personal bit of salt on that, is emotions and intuition is using the brain in a way that is harmonious with those. So we have good intentions behind our brain, because, again, we can use our brain to make weapons of mass destruction, or we can use nuclear energy to power, you know, whatever. However you feel about nuclear energy, you know.
That is an upcoming discussion for
the
sure.
fact remains that you can use that technology for good or evil. So...
Right.
The second is the resilience of nature, and I think this one was my favorite because there's a George Carlin quote that says, like,
Ooh, I'm already interested.
he's like, planet's fine. We're the ones who are fucked.
Yeah. I totally remember that quote, and I love it so much.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's so typical George
Sorry,
Carlin.
Mom, for the language. I didn't say it. Carlin did.
It's okay. If you're hearing this, it's probably bleeped.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
This is not the HBO version.
Thanks.
This is public television. Welcome to PBS.
This is the family version. But yeah, I love that quote because he's really right. Like, in the more famous words of everyone's favorite director of chaos, life finds a way. You know?
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff Goldblum.
It's true, though. Like, I mean, the globe itself has been here a lot longer than we have.
Yeah.
In fact, if you look at geologic time, the human beings have been here for a hilariously, like, blip.
Is it like
compared...
a minute or a second?
Well, so here's how I was taught this. So if you picture a whole football field, this is how long humans have been on the Earth compared to the Earth itself. If you look at an actual football field, and in terms of measuring time from one side to the other, human beings have maybe done like a few inches.
Yeah.
And that's assuming that the entire length of the football field is like millions of years.
Right.
We're like maybe a few inches worth of time of that, and we've managed to make enough of an impact to where we're
say that again.
Yeah, we have a name for it. The Anthropocene became a name
Yeah.
because this is the age of human beings. Yeah. Just to bounce off of what you're saying, I mean, the impact that we have based on our abilities the whole resilience of nature was a really impactful section for me as well, because when she's talking about how nature's going to be fine, she told that story of going and visiting a camp in Auschwitz.
Yeah, I thought that was
a camp in Auschwitz. She went and visited both Auschwitz camps, 1 and 2, and I think it was the other Auschwitz camp. I forget what it's called now, but she goes to the other one that was kind of nearby, and it was pretty barren. And she saw just in this sunlight, I could just see the scene. It's like a Disney scene where this ray of sunlight came into the building and this little seedling was sprouting. And she's like, if that's not a testimony to this, resilience of nature, I don't know what is. Here's a camp that was home to unimaginable suffering. And up through the ashes comes this beautiful sprout, this delicate new sprout.
My
new beginnings.
Sci-fi side was like, it's the quest plant. I'm not being very serious, but yeah, no, that was a good one. Then she talks about like how Chernobyl's come back and how like nature has an amazing way of like, well, heck, if there's been some amazing studies on even mushrooms and was it silkworms that are eating plastic now? Like,
I heard something about that.
Something crazy, like stuff that we should absolutely be investing more time in. But the fact is that nature will find a way, and nature doesn't really need us that much. Now, that's not to say we aren't responsible for nature and how we interact with it. We absolutely are. But it's like, in every like dystopian future where nature tries to get rid of us through viruses and plagues and stuff like that. So it just comes down to like that harmonious thing of nature. And I think the First Nation people had it right, because they had a creed where they only took what they need. And they gave back. And they gave back. And that's a huge part of living harmoniously with nature. But again, it comes down to nature will find a way. And it has. And it has multiple times. Even through mass extinctions, it somehow still made it. That's still not an excuse to behave poorly to nature, though.
Have you heard of have you heard of the video game Horizon Zero Dawn?
I love that one.
Oh man.
Oh my gosh.
What a cool game.
That was a cool game.
Let's nerd out for a second on that.
Okay.
In that game, if you're not familiar with games, I forget who listens to these sometimes. If you're not familiar with things like video games, I am. And there's this game on the PS4 called Horizon Zero Dawn, and it's based in this world that is post-apocalyptic, but it's also, but it's done in such a brilliant way. The human race were nearly annihilated.
Yeah.
Really, all life on Earth was nearly annihilated because of AI.
Yeah.
And not to ruin too much about the plot, but basically humans have gone back to tribes. And what's interesting is the tribes are completely mixed cultural.
Yeah.
There's different skin colors, different backgrounds. That doesn't really matter so much, but because this is a post-society world, and you find these memories, you find these clues of it all the time. There's these ruins of huge cities, and there's just like everything's overgrown in that game, where nature has just taken everything back, and it is just this beautiful scene. And it's done so realistically well, effects wise, and this is why I'm even bothering to talk about a video game, is that it really connects you to what it might look like. And it really does look like what we've seen nature do in certain places at different ruins. Cool. Oh, it's just such a brilliantly done game.
You should play it just because it's fun.
Oh man, do it. Robot dinosaurs, do it.
That's like the coolest part.
Yeah. But yeah, so the resilience of nature. Yes, we were talking about the resilience. Did we get on to the next one already?
No, we haven't.
Okay.
So number 3 is the energy enthusiasm that is found or can be kindled among young people worldwide, and this one is huge. She has her Roots and Shoots program, which I think is adorable. But I'm just even thinking to my nephew, who is so obsessed with whales, and is like, he's 6 now, but when he was 5. We didn't get to go on his birthday because of the coronavirus. We were going to go whale watching. And he told my sister that we need to set aside a day to pick up garbage on the beach, which I thought, it touched my heart, because we took him to the Oregon coast for a day trip. And I have this thing against garbage, which you know that quite well. I'm over there like picking up garbage everywhere, and he got all excited about it. And just like that one moment, that's all he needed as a small kid to realize garbage doesn't belong to the ground. And so now he picks up garbage.
Yeah.
Like kids are so I mean, duh, kids are the future. I hate to use that cliche, but they get really excited about nature.
But they're pure passion. I mean,
Yeah.
kids get really into stuff in this very innocent way. It hasn't been bogged down
Yeah.
with the realities of harshness of
Yeah.
life yet. And I don't know. It's something to do with that, where it allows kids to just focus full bore
Yeah.
on, like, they don't worry about the complexities of
No.
things like depression and society
And financial
weighing certain
woes.
stresses on you, woes and things like
Yeah.
that. They don't have that to worry about.
Yeah.
They have problem,
Yeah,
solution.
exactly.
I adore that about kids.
Yeah.
Like, that means we got to do this.
Why are we hunting whales right now? That doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. I'm like, yeah, buddy, I know it doesn't.
I know.
But we
Yeah.
are. And so, yeah, and just watching, like, my youngest nephew's obsession with worms. Like, his passion for worms, I ended up watching a worm documentary. I'm like, what is it about
Oh,
worms?
yeah, you said-
Yeah,
you
and
told
now
me
I'm,
about
like,
that.
really excited about worms. And then I was like, I need to reread Dune. And then, like, never mind. Sorry. That was a tangent right there. Let's talk about the sand dunes the sandworms on
dude.
Arrakis. Let's not.
Well, the spice,
It
the
must
spice.
flow.
But the interesting thing about this, young people, is that this book was written in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
This is pre-Greta.
Yeah.
So, if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say Greta, good Lord, get out from under the rock, people.
You probably, you need more hope than the Sustainable
Man.
Culture podcast can give
I
you.
know. But Greta Thunberg, of course, this was before her.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is this is almost like a prediction. I mean,
Yeah.
she's been involved with young people with her program for a long time, clearly.
Well, and I think she's like the forerunner because I actually went onto her website to look at the Roots and Shoots program and how big it is. It's huge.
It's
So
huge
she's
worldwide,
been-
isn't it?
Yeah, she's been growing this for 20 years. And so, just her, insight to see that kids are the future has already changed the future.
Right.
And that's why I love Jane. It's just because her solutions are so simple but so profound.
Yeah.
So, and plus, like you said, kids are just laser focused on one thing.
Well, and they get so pumped. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know. I grew up watching Bill Nye the Science Guy a lot.
dude.
It was one of my
yes.
favorite shows.
Same.
And the cool thing about that, if you haven't watched those shows in a while, it might be cool to dip back in. I don't know if
totally did.
Netflix still has it, but I know they did for a while. But
The newer ones aren't as good to me. I love the old ones, and I
yeah,
watched. The
well,
old
they
ones
had
all
the
time.
they had the old ones.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
had. But if you notice in the old ones, there's the cool. You remember the cool they'd side off to a little demonstration video.
Yes.
It was always kids doing those
Yes.
videos,
Yes,
and they
it
were
was.
so good at it. If
Yeah.
you look back at them now, the way they talk, I mean, they're just done so impeccably well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're like, these are kids talking about science topics
Mm-hmm.
that most grown adults nowadays wouldn't even I just feel like a lot of people know a lot less than they should about some pretty basic
Yeah.
things, and when it comes to kids being able to present those things,
Yeah.
it's really interesting because if you think about it, here I go again. If you think about it, kids being
Another
able to
sticker.
explain scientific principles really well, like
Yeah.
on Bill Nye the Science Guy, and you're not going to listen to Greta about climate change.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I'm not taking too hard a stance on that on this podcast. I tend not to, but that's always been a funny thought
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
for me. I'm like, well, hang on.
I think I wouldn't say our generation quite, and I'm not going to get into generation wars here, but I think a lot of older generations really underestimate young kids. They're super surprised that they can even spell their name anymore. It's like,
Yeah.
no, wait, kids are incredibly intelligent.
Well, I think that happens generation after generation
Yeah.
after generation. I think it's easy to just kind of assume that kids, being that they're inexperienced,
Yeah.
being that they are naive, sure. It doesn't mean that through naivety you can't come up with really good
Right.
ideas.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's naivety that can actually be a really good
Yeah.
tool, because if you are so innocent to where you look at a possible utopian future,
Yeah.
like those of us environmentalists who really try and hang on to that dream, I don't see that should ever be condemned.
Yeah.
I think that kind of a mindset, kids are all scientists because they're
Yeah.
all looking at what's this, what's that, why does it
Yeah.
work this way, why does it work that way? That mindset is what is so often lost in society.
Yeah.
It's us adults that are the ones going, well, we just
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm cynicism impersonated. And it's like, that kind of stuff is not within children. That's
Right.
not within the mindset, unless you've had an extremely traumatic childhood.
Right. Yeah.
which we're not really referencing.
Yeah.
But it's I love that section. I love
Yeah.
that this is a section that she talks so heavily about young people.
Yeah, I agree. And then finally, the fourth one, the indomitable human spirit. And this is where Jane, like, kind of erases all, like, the sad and negative that she had to experience. And it's just like, these are the people going out there and doing amazing things. Like, these are the people who are acting on what they're saying. These are the people who, against all odds, have been like, I'm going to do it. Like the blind magician who gave her Mr. H, the monkey. And tons of other people who, against all odds, like the guitar player who doesn't have an arm, and the comb she bought from the leper who's missing, like, all of his limbs, but made it with his teeth. And just...
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
what an incredible...
Yeah.
How?
So there is, like, the indomitable human spirit of, like, even in the face of, like, the worst challenges, there is something that drives us forward, always.
When you talk about just being human,
Yeah.
it doesn't really... I mean, that's saying more than I think is mentioned there. I mean, what it is to be human, we could talk about that all day. But when you are looking for what makes you you, it starts as a kid.
Yeah.
And if you're a young person in today's world, currently you're being defined by two key things: what your parents tell you, or whoever's raising you tells you, and what society is telling you.
I do not envy young kids today with social media.
Oh my gosh, I don't even know what that's like. I mean, I cannot even imagine what that's like.
I wasn't even allowed to have a MySpace until I was like 15.
And then people got mad at you because they weren't in your top 8.
I know. Gosh. And now it's just like, it's
So
pervasive.
I noticed you put Spencer on your top 8.
Or spending 6 hours finding the perfect background with the perfect music combo.
Ooh, that was good. When you went to a page, I learned HTML for MySpace, you guys.
Yeah, but I can't even imagine kids these days. And it makes me sad for them, really, because you have so many sources immediately telling you what you should think. They don't really have a chance for self-discovery in the way that I think we did, or the generations before us who are constantly out in nature. Like, did you ever get locked out of the house as a kid and all you had to do was, like, play with a stick and, like, a ladybug if you found one?
Yeah, we grew up in many places, but we lived in the South for a number of years in Alabama, and we lived a decent, kind of out in the boonies, as one does in Alabama. That's kind of most of the state. And they...
Yeah.
Where y'all live? Down that way? Further? Down yonder way. And it was always interesting because Dad sometimes would be at work. He owned his own business, so he'd be off working. And so sometimes we get home from school, and maybe he wasn't home yet. That wasn't often. I don't want to make my dad sound like he was someone who was rarely home. But whenever we would beat him there, which wasn't often, sometimes the door would be locked, and we didn't have a key quite yet. And we lived on maybe half an acre, but we went outside, and we did stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was boring stuff, but it was outside.
I remember my sister and I had the biggest imaginations because our parents, they just get sick of us. I mean, I had a computer and my parents had to be like, you need to leave your room, go outside. And they would, like, literally shove us outside. And so my sister and I went on many adventures. Like, I was always a horse or a dragon. That was my thing.
It was one of the two.
Yeah. Or I had, like,
I'm either a horse or I'm a horse with wings and fangs and fire teeth.
Or we would go on quote unquote scientific expeditions. Like, there was, where we lived, there's, like, lots of, like, I think it was, like, mica or something, like, in the ground. And so we'd go mining. Or we'd go on bumblebee expeditions where we would go, like, observe the bumblebees with our field journals and stuff like that.
Oh, sweet.
I had a microscope that belonged to my dad from the 70s. So it was one of those mirror ones where you had to, like, angle it right perfect with the light. And so I would look at, like, slides that were very old. I did eventually get terrified of those slides because at the time I didn't understand that they sterilized them. So one of them broke and I was, like, convinced I was going to get anthrax. I was 10. I didn't know any better. But, and my parents were always, like, encouraging the outside life. Like, we had a telescope because I was huge into astronomy and, like, world myth. And I don't like to, like, compare generations, but I don't really see that a lot. And so it makes me wonder, I mean, what is that going to do to a young person's relationship with the world around them?
Well, I think what you're touching on is just it is a very cultural difference.
It is.
The generations.
Yeah.
Because what you're saying is that when you grew up, when people of our generation grew up, we didn't have as much to distract us. Just technologically, we just weren't there.
Yeah.
And we had some things, but it was kind of just happening.
Yeah,
we had
old Game Boy.
Game Boys that were still, we had Snake on our Nokia brick phones.
Or
and
Gigapets when they were a thing.
Gigapets!
I still have mine.
I had the Digimon ones.
Oh, you did?
I had the Digimon, what's it called? The little pets, anyway.
Yeah.
And you could connect them and battle them.
Yeah, I had one of those.
They were those for boys.
Yeah.
That was it. How it was marketed.
I still have my Gigapet, my
Oh my
purple
God.
one. It's a puppy.
That's amazing. But the idea here is that when we grew up, we didn't have the opportunity to be distracted
Yeah.
like people do now. Now it's like you don't even have to try.
Yeah.
There just is technology everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like candy. It's become as much a pillar as running water has.
Yeah.
And it's really a completely different cultural environment.
Yeah.
Which is what you're saying, if
Yeah.
I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, no, I don't know how I got from there, from the indomitable human spirit. I think maybe it's like my subconscious pondering, what does that do to the human spirit with constant flow of information, where if you need something, you can just look it up. You don't have to go figure it out yourself, I guess, is what I'm saying. And there is some elements of innovation that are so natural to human spirit that if you take them away, is the human spirit like a muscle? Do we have to constantly keep using it, or is it something that's inherent in us? I guess.
Well, that speaks to the intuition thing we were mentioning. I mean, I think it similar to a muscle. I think that if you don't try, at least make the effort to at least figure out how to use your intuition. Some people are so out of touch with, maybe are so left-brained.
Yeah.
And this happens actually pretty commonly, where people are so out of touch with intuitive sides and empathy and things like that it is not even familiar to them. It's so foreign that they've just written it off altogether
Straight up
as
Vulcans.
That's not me anymore. Yeah, exactly. And
That's not logical.
we're just Vulcan. Yeah, that is not logical. And I think it is like a muscle. And that's one of the main things I try to focus on pretty commonly, because if we are to, with everything that's going on right now, the world's on fire. It's insane. And it sounds pessimistic. I promise. It's just,
I mean, that's pretty much
there's
just
a lot
fact.
happening. There's a lot happening. And with so much heat between different groups of people and all kinds of different groups of people right now, this is not just about race issues. This is about all the other. Race is the thing we're talking about right now because of the death of George Floyd and all the riots and protests and everything going on. But there's a multitude of other issues. Remember climate change, guys? We haven't even talked about that on this show.
Yeah,
Not so much.
you're
Remember the entire umbrella of environmental justice. We haven't even really expanded on that.
Have we even talked about like the pipeline issues in America?
Not yet. Don't you worry.
Okay.
But the reason I'm mentioning that is because how we approach improving those skills is what I truly believe is where everything moving from here in history forward is going to rely on our personal self-growth and interpersonal skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we can't improve those relationships, how do we expect to build these towers, and on what foundation?
Yeah. I mean,
If we can't talk to each other and communicate and synergize, like Stephen Covey says, I don't understand how we're supposed to do anything as a society. I took a walk recently, just around the block, and I was looking around, and this was a particular day actually where I was working on my intuition. I was just trying to not talk outside. I talk so much in my regular life, and I was really just trying to stop and listen to that stuff around me and everything. I was thinking about the observation episode that I did where I was talking about how important it is to learn how to become less auditory and take more in, and less auditory, less verbal, more auditory. And I noticed a lot of things, but one of the main thoughts that I couldn't shake, and I still haven't been able to shake, is that our whole society as it currently exists was done with synergy. Like we had to synergize and be we had to establish an interdependence with each other to build road systems, the highway system of the United States is insane. It started in the early 1900s and only finished in the 1990s, you guys.
Yeah.
That took a long time. And as we know it took 90 plus years or something like that. I did a report on this. I should know this more accurately. But
That's right, because is that the one you had me edit?
I think so. It was
Okay.
Thomas Jefferson. It was about transportation in America.
Yes.
Sustainability. You did
yeah,
edit that.
I did.
Hey, look at that. Classmates. And so the whole thing of that is, it took us a lot to develop what we currently have and know to be regular daily life in the United States. We have buildings that are made a certain way. We have development projects that are done a certain way. We have created standards for these huge development projects and skyscraper projects and city planning and all this stuff. We've done all this already. This is where we are at. These are the systems we're trying to fix and innovate better solutions for and do all this. But we did it because we worked together.
Yeah.
We didn't do it because we didn't have a foundation.
Yeah.
If we didn't have a foundation, we would not have modern society as we know it. We just need to fix that foundation and build it into something that is more built on interpersonal communication and hope and positive thoughts.
Like super segues into we talked about how the world is so overwhelming for people right now. Like, what do they do? Like, how do they listen? How do they help? Like,
I'm glad you asked.
yes.
I've got a solution, Bree.
Let's hear it.
It's from Jane Goodall, so I don't have a solution, but Jane Goodall does.
And it's beautiful.
It is so beautiful. She talks a lot about a lot of stuff in this book, but what I absolutely love about Jane Goodall, apart from everything else I've already mentioned, is that she always is able to break things down and then finish up with a nice practical, that makes sense, thought. And so when we're talking about all this stuff, I think a common thought with a lot of us is, well, okay, so here's all this philosophy. What can I actually do, as you were saying?
Yeah.
So she says, it can be very simple. We can make a sad or lonely person smile. We can make a miserable dog wag his tail or a cat purr. We can give water to a little wilting plant. We cannot solve all the problems of the world, but we can often do something about the problems under our noses. We can't save all the starving children and beggars of Africa or Asia, but what about the street children, the homeless, the aged in our own hometown? And this is such a cool way to finish her book. This is in the last chapter, one of the very last pages. Mm-hmm. That's what I hope the takeaway would be of this episode, of any sustainability topic for you guys, and it is for me often, is what can I do? Well, the biggest impact of what we can do is in our own hometowns. Yes, there's big issues that are being thrown at us all the time. We're dealing with, currently, it's focused on race. Absolutely. We have to. Very important issue. Very critical, crucial society impact issue. There's also all these other issues that are going to come at us. But before we start thinking nationally, go the other way. Think inside out. Create seeds of change. Really focus on your hometown and think, what skills do I have to contribute? And if you're having a hard time even getting there, focus on yourself first. As we've mentioned many times in this podcast, if you are going to help instill change and inspire true, tangible changes in your community, you have to start with yourself. So once you've gotten there and you want to impact your community, look and see where you fit. Just look and see where you fit.
Or just ask your neighbor how they're doing.
Ask your neighbor.
We don't even talk to our neighbors hardly anymore.
And she breaks it down. I love how she says, we can make a miserable dog wag his tail or a cat purr.
Well, it's
These are
like
such
thinking of
tiny things.
the very last snowflake that starts the avalanche, basically.
Yeah.
Systemic societal changes starts with the teeny tiny changes that we do every day.
Yep.
It's habits. It's little habits we make that, it's that first step on a 1,000-mile journey. People think that they have to eat the whole pie at once, which is a total cliche, but no, you start with one forkful first, and it has to happen within your community, because what's the point if you change society if your community's not ready to change with it?
So well said, actually. And that's really the central thing there is, how are you supposed to expect that which is around you to change if you're poisoning the entire bunch?
Yeah.
It's not going to work.
So start small. It doesn't have to be big. Big changes are often hard. Big changes are actually often unsustainable without the small work that goes in behind them.
Amen to
So,
that. I mean, it takes the teeny tiny things that create the foundation on which we stand.
And this is all about sustainability.
This
so.
is all about sustainability. I mean, we
Yeah.
have to focus on these foundational aspects. And in sustainability, in environmentalism, I should say, and this is a small critique I always tend to have for environmentalism, is it is very easy for many environmentalists to forget about this, that if we are going to really create these big changes and really push ourselves into these sustainable futures and build ourselves into people that default hope for positive futures, rather than becoming nihilist or cynical or distrusting each other in the government and things like that. If we are people who are focused on the betterment and the progression and the innovation of mankind, then we have to focus on small scales, tiny, tiny scales. And this book just does such a good job at helping you think about that. It doesn't really talk about it so much in detail.
So I have a nature reference.
Okay.
It's a parable, if you will. Once upon a time, we had an aquarium, and it went south real fast, like really, really fast. Like algae, overgrowth, everything. Nothing we did fixed it. So we had to. I took the fish back to the pet store, and we had to scrap the aquarium. Well, here's where I realized I went wrong, and so I started another aquarium. This time it's a betta fish. It's a lot easier for me to take care of. But I realized, and with any aquarium owner will know this, that if you don't condition the tank first, you're going to have problems down the road. So if you're not allowing the microflora and bacteria to colonize the tank, which takes about 2 months before you actually add fish, your colony's going to die. And so a lot of people skip that stage and then wonder why 2 months down the road all their fish are dead, and then they try to attack it with, additives and chemicals and stuff that by that point the water quality it's gone. It's too late. You have to start completely over. So let the microflora grow in your communities first. There's my parable for the day.
I love that.
Yeah. It's all microscopic, guys.
Start small, guys.
Yeah.
Microscopically if necessary.
Yeah, and
it's
sometimes
so true.
that microscopic is within. You know more than anyone, because this is like your thing, that when somebody's hurting, or if you yourself are hurting, you focus inward. For some reason, the country which is hurting is not focusing inward. We're focusing outward in a weird way. We need to bring it back in. Let the organism have a chance to heal first.
Right.
And then go after the problem, because right now we're a giant wounded animal trying to fight a bear.
Absolutely.
It's not working.
Absolutely. So on that note, I just I appreciate everybody who decided to participate and read the book with us if you did. And, I thoroughly enjoyed this experience. And this will go down as one of my favorite books I've read in a long time.
I'm so glad you liked it.
I love the book. And this definitely, it's going to be hanging out on my bookshelf for a pretty good while.
Yeah,
So,
same.
yeah. So thank you all so much
Yes,
for
you.
listening to the show. It's been just a blast getting to talk about this book. And so if you want to know what book we're reading next, sneak preview here.
Yes.
I have to order my book still.
I do too.
But the next book that we're going to be talking about is a book by Kate Rayworth from the UK, and it's a book called Donut Economics. This book has received, I wish I had it so I could show it to you, but look it up, donut as in spelled like donut.
Circle pastry.
The circle pastry, the delicious, delicious treat. Kind of a funky title, but she talks extensively about restructuring our economic system to systems that will less define linear systems and more define circular systems. And she never really mentions sustainable societies specifically. But as people who study sustainability, it's a particularly interesting
because
topic.
nature works in circular closed
It does.
systems.
That is what she does talk about.
Yeah.
Is she does reference how nature works cyclically.
Yeah.
And that's how she believes we need to model economic systems. So I am thrilled.
I'm really excited to read
get
that
into
one.
that. Yeah,
that'll
that's
be
going to
fun.
be fascinating. It's going to be a bit of a pace changer. We will always talk about loving each other and feeling compassion towards each other. And, we've never really abruptly said so, but we will sometimes talk about, because we have to, talk about the fact that Black Lives Matter and how it's important to actually say it that way. Not going to get too much into that, but these types of things have to be brought up and talked about, because if we don't talk about them, we never will. So again, thank you again for tuning in. It's been lovely getting together with you guys. Thanks again for coming back by, Bree.
Yeah, it's been so much fun. I can't wait for book 2. That's
I'm
great.
stoked. There's going to be many books to come. If you liked what you heard or watched, remember you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts. You can find us on, what else are we on? What else are we
you
on?
on Stitcher?
SoundCloud, Stitcher. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All the things. Wherever you listen to podcasts, we're generally there. And make sure you like, subscribe. If you're on YouTube, ring the bell so that you know when we're actually releasing episodes, so you're notified of it. It's going to be, more and more often. Right now it's bi-weekly. Might be little special videos here and there. We'll see. But I appreciate you guys joining in. Please support the podcast however you can. You can also go on patreon.com as well. Patreon.com/Sustainable Culture Podcast, and place donation if you'd like. But otherwise, this has been the second book club episode. I've been Jet.
I've been Bray.
And thank you so much for tuning in. Have a nice day, guys.